I want you to read the title of this article for me. The American Dream will now cost you a staggering $3.4 million, new study says. Here's why that white picket fence may be out of reach for most US families. So the American Dream is all but dead, and we need to talk about it. Except we don't, and I lied, and what we actually need to talk about is dog shit journalism. Because this article is one of the most pathetically written clickbaity articles that I have ever seen in my entire life. And I'm hoping that by going over this article together, you will be better equipped in order to fact check sensationalist clickbait headlines like this one. The first thing we're gonna do is see what their source is, and from their source, it's this analysis by Investopedia, which I have pulled up here, and this is what I'm gonna be referencing and criticizing specifically because all Yahoo Finance did was kind of yoinked the Investopedia article, so this is what we're going to be talking about. The American Dream now costs $3,455,305. That's the estimated cost of the common milestone, including marriage, 2 children, homes, healthcare, cars, and education. The American Dream was one of Investopedia's top search terms of the year, blah, 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 blah. But rising costs have made the typical American Dream out of reach for many. In fact, the average lifetime earnings of Americans across all education levels is approximately $2.3 million. That's over $1 million short of the estimated cost of the American Dream. And this leads into the first issue that I have with this article, and that's that the author does not seem to have actually read the sources that they're citing. Here in this article, they say across all education levels, approximately they earn $2.3 million, and they cite this. So I went over to that, started reading it for myself, and I came across their $2.3 million number, but this is what it actually says. Getting a bachelor's degree adds another large increase in lifetime earnings, with a median earnings of $56,700, $27.26 per hour, or $2.3 million over a lifetime. Bachelor's degrees holders earn 31% more than workers with associate's degrees and 74% more than those with just a high school diploma. And you'll note that the article says that in fact, the average lifetime earning of Americans across all education levels is $2.3 million. But this very specifically says that the $2.3 million number is just for people with bachelor's degrees. If we want to see the actual amount people across all education levels earned, what we do is we have to go just one page earlier and see here. It says overall, the median lifetime earnings for all workers was $1.7 million, which is just under $42,000 per year. But that doesn't even really tell a particularly good or full story, because what we have here is the median lifetime earnings by highest educational attainment in 2009 dollars, which this study, I believe, adjusted for inflation in 2014 when it was published. And we can see that the more education you get, the more money you earn, which probably tracks with what most people would assume. A lot of jobs require college degrees, but a lot of those jobs also pay more on average. So if you have a college degree, you're qualified for a job, usually that pays more money. But also, this study is done in 2014 about statistics taken in 2009. So right off the bat, Investopedia is misciting outdated sources from 10 years ago, which they didn't even adjust for inflation. And this is not the only time they do this. In fact, I found 3 instances in which they did this very same thing. The next instance being down here is the cost of raising children to 18. It says it's basically 577,000. It says the average cost of raising a child until age 18, total shown for 2 children, and then they give their source. So basically what they did is they took whatever the source's cost for raising one child was, and they doubled it. And to be fair, this time they say that they pulled it from 2015 data and adjusted it for inflation to 2022, which they did. I checked their numbers. They pulled the correct numbers. They adjusted for inflation correctly. They multiplied it by 2 correctly. The only thing they didn't do correctly was actually read the report that they cited as their source. Unfortunately for them, I actually did read the report that they cited for their source, and it says this: expenditures by married couples households with only 1 children average 27% more than expenditures per child in a 2-child married couple family. So people with 1 child pay 27% more for that 1 child than they would pay for 2 children per child. And this kind of makes sense, because if you've had 1 child, then you probably are able to reuse a lot of the stuff you bought for the 1 child, such as clothes now become hand-me-downs. If you can reuse cribs and baby clothes and baby shoes, and if you bought a larger car to be able to have a car seat, or that would be safer, you wouldn't have to buy another car. Child care places might offer a discount if you have 2 children as opposed to just 1 child, or any number of other reasons that it might be cheaper to have a second child than it would be to have a first one. So to take whatever the number is for 1 child and then just double it is incorrect. And the report very specifically says that's incorrect by citing the fact that on a per child average, you pay 27% more for 1 child than you do for 2. The next thing they royally messed up is health insurance costs. Here they say that health insurance costs $934,752. Average family premium costs, so cost for your whole family, with the total showing 39 years of concurrent costs, how long you might be in the workforce paying for your own health insurance. And then right here it says 2018 to 2020, Peterson KFF is their source for where they got the number, basically almost $1 million for your total healthcare costs. So, of course, I popped over there to see if it was actually correct, and it says annual family premiums for employer-sponsored health insurance average $22,463 this year, similar to last year's number. And to be fair, if you multiply this number right here by 39, you do get something very close to this 934,000 number. Except if you read just one sentence farther, you see this. On average, workers this year contributed $6,106 towards the cost of family premium, while employers paid for the rest. And if you take the $6,106, which is just what the employee is paying, and you multiply it by the 39 years, you get about $238,000. Not $934,000. And this one I think is the most egregious. With the other two, there were long, complicated, unfun to read reports or research papers that they would have had to have dug through in order to get the numbers they were looking for. But this one, they took whatever it was and they just had to read one sentence farther. And even worse than that, it's right here in the title. Annual family premiums for employer coverage averaged $22,463 this year, and workers contributing an average of $6,106 benchmark employer benefit study finds. It's right there in the title. They didn't even have to read the article and they could have gotten this right. Now, I want to pause here and say that I'm not saying that the American dream is or isn't dead. I'm not making any statements as to whether I think it's still achievable or totally out of reach for the average American. All I'm saying is that this article right here is a clickbait and sensationalist article that needs to be called out for the fact that it is factually and mathematically wrong at almost every point that it tries to make in order to make you, I guess, feel hopeless so that you'll read the article and make Investopedia some money. Now, the second big issue I have with this article is that it does not mention investing or returns anywhere. Now, the most astute of you will point out that right here it has $715,968, which is average amount needed to retire. We can scroll that down. It says that right here. It's 80% of the 2022 median income household, total showing 12 years average life expectancy past 65. Now, not only is $715,000 nowhere near enough to retire on, but also often when it's in retirement, it's been put into retirement accounts, 401ks, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, HSAs, or any number of other accounts. You're not just taking the money and putting it into a bank where it sits there and never grows. In fact, if you were to take the $56,700 number that they're using and you were to invest just 10% of that over the course of the 40 years that you were working, assuming an 8% return, which is actually a bit low, you can see here that the S&P has averaged a 10% return over the last 30 years, but we'll say 8% to be conservative. Over that amount of time, you would end up, when you retired at the age of 62, with $1.66 million in retirement. If you add that to the $2 million that you have made over the course of your career just from the $56,700 minus the 10% you're investing, then you come out with $3.66 million total at the end of your life, which is actually more than the $3.4 million that they say you need. Now, we'll get into why this is not an entirely correct way to look at this, but just by using the numbers that they are using, you actually can reasonably hit this $3.4 million number. Now, the third issue I have is that they include the cost of childcare for 2 children, but then they only include the income for 1 parent. Where there are babies, there were adults that made those babies, which means that whatever amount they're using for income, which in this case was the $2.3 million, which was what the study cited was made just by one person with, down here, just by one person with a bachelor's degree, whatever number they're using, which in case is this one, they should double that for there being 2 parents to those 2 children. Now, I realize that's not exactly correct because any 2 people in a relationship will not be earning the exact same amount, but the point still stands that the income is just blatantly wrong because it's assuming 1 income for 2 people. Even if you're divorced or a single parent, there's usually still some kind of childcare cost that's shared between the 2 people that made the baby. The fourth issue that I have with this article is that you may note that throughout this entire thing and all the costs it's giving and all the income amounts that it's assuming, it does not once mention taxes. The huge irony of this being that this is specifically an investment and personal finance themed blog, website, and company, and they completely forgot to take out taxes. The 56,700 number that is cited in this research paper does not assume any taxes. This is just the raw amount that you would take home if there were no other expenses in your life. And this article takes that amount directly without subtracting the approximately 25% you would be paying in that tax bracket. And not only would that reduce your take home, but that would then also reduce the amount of money that you were actually able to invest, meaning you probably actually wouldn't hit this $3.4 million number. Most of the mistakes that I'm pointing out here would actually make it easier to hit this supposed American dream, but this one specifically makes it way, way harder. But now to do a little turnaround, this next issue makes it way, way easier because they don't take into account Social Security. In fact, they don't take into account any post-retirement income at all. The number that they're citing here, this $2.3 million, assumes that you work from 22 to 62 or 26 to 65, whatever numbers they're using, and then on that day you stop making money and don't make a penny more until you die. But people in retirement have Social Security, they have dividend payouts, some of them have pensions, they've got inheritances that they get from relatives who die. You don't just stop earning money the second that you retire. And then the other issues I have are kind of a little bit more nitpicky. Nitpicky in that I think almost every one of the numbers that they're using here is dumb or illogical or something you wouldn't actually have to purchase. For example, the car purchases, they're assuming that you're buying a 6-year-old car every 6 years and paying $27,133 for it. I don't think you need a $27,000 car every 6 years. If you were to just buy a $15,000 car every 8 years, you would save yourself about $150,000 over the course of your entire life, which is what this car purchase assumes that you're doing. The next thing is this college fund, where it's the average cost of 1 year at a public school for 2 people, which means it's $21,000 a year, which means they should have multiplied it by 4 to make it $84,000. So I don't know why they left it at $42,000, and then for 2 children, that'd be $168,000. It's weird that they would only include 1 year of college in this, but also if you're paying $21,000 a year for college, I think you probably need to be going to college somewhere else because that's way too expensive. It's also assuming the average price of a home, which is like between $350,000 and $400,000 depending on where you go, and then it extrapolates this out with mortgage payments and so on and so forth. But I think you can get a much cheaper home if you shop around just a little bit or wait for the right one to come on the market. And also it's calculating this off of 7.2% interest, but the mortgage rate interest has only been 7.2% for like the last couple years, as you can see here, and probably it's going to go back down in a bit, at which point you can just refinance, and so you won't end up paying the entirety of this $796,000. So remember, your clicks are worth a lot of money. In fact, they're worth so much money that even reputable companies like Investopedia are willing to put out absolute hot garbage articles in order to get them and make a quick buck. Thanks for watching.